Hey everybody, hopefully you're having a good weekend. Now we do have some news to talk about. Galaxy Digital facilitated this massive transaction, one of the largest Bitcoin transactions ever. And Galaxy completed the sale of more than 80,000 Bitcoin, valuation of over $9 billion, for a Satoshi era investor, a very early investor, and this is one of the most significant exits from Bitcoin. This was part of their estate planning strategy. Maybe this person died. The money could be getting split between family members. We can only speculate. Now, this news dropped on Saturday. I think a lot of this selling was happening on Friday. This could have been why we dropped so hard here, from like 118 to 114,000 in one day, quickly recovered. That's what's very impressive. The market absorbed this $9 billion of Bitcoin in like one day, and we're back where we were in the beginning. Also, from the beginning of this run, after this consolidation, we did conveniently hit the 618 before swiftly recovering. Bitcoin's getting awful close to that 120,000 psychological resistance. I'd love to see a candle actually close above, not like these, where we go up, by the end of the day it's back down. This is a resistance, and it's been a strong one so far. I do think Bitcoin has a good chance here to break out, but do be aware we have some upcoming events. At the end of the month here, we have PCE. We've talked about this a few times. It's coming out July 31. This is going to be a day after the Fed meeting, and this is going to be important for any hopes of a rate cut in the following meeting. Along with seeing positive CPI and PPI in early August, this is going to be important. It is getting very close to 2%, but we are hovering at 2.3% and 2.2. We've just been bouncing around here. We need to see this come down, getting closer and closer to the Fed's 2% target. Now, the market's almost at 100% agreement that we are not getting a rate cut in July, but the market sees a very good probability of a rate cut in September, with a 62% chance right now of one 25 basis point cut, 35% chance of leaving things current. Going to October, about a 50% chance of one rate cut, and a higher chance of two rate cuts or 50 basis point cuts than a chance of no cut at all. And by the end of the year, the market sees the most likely outcome of two rate cuts, 25 basis point cuts each, or 150 basis point cut, bringing us down with a 42% chance, 7% chance by the end of this year of leaving rates where they are, a little under a 1 in 10 chance. We are getting some rate cuts, probably starting in September. We also need to see some positive inflation data. We need to see CPI, PPI coming down, PCE hopefully coming in under 2.3%. And if we see some weakness in the labor market, that'll help the Fed cut. Now, let me know what you guys think about the 4-year cycle. Bitcoin has followed a 4-year cycle since its inception. There's always the halving year, which is a good year. The year after the halving, which is usually peak. 2 years after the halving, which is usually the crypto winter. And there's speculation that 2026 is going to be an up year, and basically it's going to break the 4-year cycle. And this belief comes from Matt Hogan of Bitwise. I bet 2026 is an up year. I broadly think we're in for a good few years. And he said the 4-year cycle is dead for several reasons, including a Bitcoin halving becoming half as important every 4 years. That's interesting. The interest rate cycle being positive for crypto, that is true. We are facing more rate cuts at the end of this year and into 2026. Rate cuts typically help risk on assets. Plus this increased clarity on regulations. The chance of significant price pullbacks have decreased as the industry gains more clarity. Blow-up risk is attenuated due to improving regulation and the institutionalization of the space. If Wall Street wants to bring Bitcoin down and buy cheaper, they will do that. You better believe that they want their Bitcoin as cheap as they can get it, and they want volatility. The long-term pro-crypto forces will overwhelm the classic 4-year cycle forces to the extent those exist, and that 2026 will be a good year. Matt Hogan says the most significant cyclical style risk for Bitcoin is the rise of Bitcoin treasury companies. Once they don't get a Bitcoin yield almost instantaneously for buying their Bitcoin, things will hit the fan, let's just say. And Van Eck also believes the same. These firms accumulating Bitcoin by issuing stock and taking on debt are vulnerable. These companies might be overextended if Bitcoin's price falls sharply, which creates a cascading effect. If Bitcoin starts declining, not as many companies are going to want to do this Bitcoin strategy. Who's going to buy Bitcoin while it's trending down, while there's panic in the air, while there's fear? When companies start realizing they can't mention these treasury strategies and have their stock instantly rise in price. When shareholders suddenly aren't eating up the dilution. Last cycle, whales sold to retail. This time, old whales sell to new long-term whales. Institutional adoption is bigger than we thought. However, Rex Capital disagrees. Bitcoin may only have a few months of price expansion left in the cycle, especially if it follows the same pattern from 2020. And he goes on to explain, Rex Capital that is, that if the Bitcoin cycle follows 2020, the market will likely peak in October, which is 550 days after the halving of 2024. You know, there's so many people, especially even here, that question the 4-year cycle. Maybe things will be different. That's what we said last cycle. Maybe things will be different. In my opinion, as we get euphoria, as we get hype, you want to secure some profits and at least prepare for a potential crypto winter. You don't want to be buying heavily as things are running up, unless you're setting a stop loss and playing very short term. But you know, in my opinion, the cycle will probably play out. Maybe we keep going up into early 2026 and then the rest of that year is bad. Maybe we see a huge sharp correction in early 2026 and by the end of 2026 we're higher than we were in the beginning. I do still think in the end the 4-year cycle will remain in effect, but maybe not to the extent we have seen in the past, these 60, 70, 80% corrections. Maybe we see a 30, 40, 50% correction. If you believe the cycles aren't going to play out and Bitcoin is just going to keep going up steadily over the long term, become less and less volatile, we're not going to have these horrible crypto winters. You don't want to get kicked out and then it just keeps running into 2026 where you hoped you would have been able to buy. The best answer to that is DCA in Bitcoin. Buy and hold, buy heavier during any pullbacks, and possibly hold off or buy lighter when there's huge runs, when there's huge amounts of euphoria, when everyone and their grandma is bullish. But let me know what you guys think. Do you believe in the 4-year cycle, or do you think the cycle is broken because of all this ETF stuff, all the institutional adoption, Bitcoin treasury companies? Things can change quickly, which creates a domino effect. And for those of us that are unsure, because no one really knows in the end, I think the best way to approach this is as we run at the end of this year, which is the expectation at least, we should be running at the end of this year. If we do, you want to take some profits, you want to secure some gains, because things don't just go up forever. Now I do want to mention CleanSpark, we had a recent golden cross. Riot also had a golden cross somewhat recently. These Bitcoin miners have been looking better from a chart perspective. CleanSpark has been in this kind of a megaphone pattern for quite a while now. Started this pattern at $6, has nearly doubled since, but is still a far climb from its cycle peak of $25. I do think we will get back there on profitable quarters. That's the key. We saw profitability and that's what brought us so far. The profitability is what got us to 25. Seeing profitability, seeing a profitable quarter, seeing their unrealized gain on Bitcoin, seeing that their operations are actually profitable based on Bitcoin's current price, that is what will push it. Being unprofitable, burning cash, that is what causes it to sell off. Along with sentiment, of course, along with Bitcoin's short-term price moves, of course. But I do personally expect some good things from the Bitcoin miners. I expect profitability. CleanSpark is expecting profitability from when they gave this guidance, which I do expect they'll beat, because during this quarter, it kept finishing strong. Bitcoin kept finishing strong in Q2. I'll show you that in a second. Be aware that there is a small gap for CleanSpark down at $10. If we have a nice pullback, maybe a test of the moving averages, a short-term drop to fill this gap, that would be a great time to buy in my opinion. But you also have to realize we are getting late into the cycle, so be aware of that. But yeah, recent golden crosses from a few of the Bitcoin miners here. You know, recent up moves in anticipation of getting back to profitability in my opinion. For things to keep moving, we do need to beat our guidances top and bottom line. The market has been running these Bitcoin miners a little bit in anticipation of some good earnings, so there might be a little bit of front running going on here. They need to exceed expectations. These need to come out really good. We need to see some great forward guidance, which I do think we will see. The last quarter that was reported for the Bitcoin miners was Q1, a quarter where Bitcoin decreased. This is the quarter where we're making a comeback. This is the quarter where Bitcoin gained. They're going to see an unrealized gain on their Bitcoin holdings. And also, so far in Q3, we are looking pretty good too. We should see some good forward guidance, some positive news there. A reason for the market to continue to buy these Bitcoin miners into strength while they're profitable, and while Bitcoin's still in an uptrend. And I'll mention Riot real quick, that golden cross that I mentioned right here. They are approaching earnings. This is going to be July 31. Mara's reporting right before that, so keep an eye on Marathon, Mara stock. It'll likely give an idea of where things are going here for the other Bitcoin miners. I do personally expect beats across the board because of Bitcoin's price performance in Q2, but let me know how you guys are feeling about the Bitcoin miners. Are they going to have a great earnings, or are things going to disappoint? We do have Bitcoin on the Bitcoin miners side for this quarter, whereas last quarter Bitcoin worked against them. Bitcoin dropped overall in that quarter. This was a good quarter for Bitcoin, and it should be reflected in their earnings, along with seeing some positive guidance because of the performance so far of Q3. But anyways, thanks as always for watching, guys. Hopefully we see this cycle continue on, get that little bit of euphoria, and lock in some gains. Prepare for a potential crypto winter. Things can go from very negative to extremely positive very quickly. Don't get caught up in the hype, and don't start chasing if things start blowing up and going to the moon without a stop loss. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I will see you tomorrow, maybe.